Well, I've lived and worked here for 20 years, and in that time I've worked in campaigning for the CBI, Confederation of British Industry, representing the businesses that sort of move the world, you know, the Land Rovers, Jaguars, GKNs. I've worked in tourism for the businesses moving hearts, like Cadbury's. I actually remember taking a chocolate cake to Sheikh Mohammed in Dubai on one occasion and desperately trying to stop it melt on the way over. And I've worked for brands like Arga Rangemaster, the brands that literally have changed the world. It was based at Coalbrookdale, where Abraham Darby first smelted iron ore with coke. And in the last 10 years, I've worked moving young minds, you know, as they learn and acquire new skills that are going to transform their lives and their life opportunities. And in all that time, as I look back over the 20 years, I was trying to think, well, what investment has this region actually had that we need for our competitiveness and to ensure quality of life for our people here in the West Midlands? And I couldn't actually think of very much. When I was at the CBI, I lobbied for what we then called the Northern Relief route. It became the M6 toll. We got that. But other than that, I cannot think of many infrastructure investments in this region over that period of 20 years. Tramline, and can you think of much else? No, not really. So actually, we move 80% of the rail freight and 30% of the road freight of the UK. We are the manufacturing heartland. It's critical to us that our people can move to get to appointments, can get overseas easily, to sell the goods that we make, the excellent goods that have changed the world and improved quality of life. And when I looked at the numbers then, I saw that actually we get around 10% per head investment in infrastructure compared to people in London and the South East. And the devolution deal, we got supposedly a package of £8 billion over 30 years, 8 billion over 30 years. But what they forget to tell you is that we're losing £4 billion up to 2019, 2020. So we're getting 8 billion over 30 years, but we're actually losing 4 billion out of our public sector grant to 2019. And when you think about money that we need for this place to be competitive, actually we're not getting enough. And when you think about Heathrow Runway 3, the government has decided that 22 billion can be found just like that to build the access to Runway 3. But they think that it's good enough for us to have 8 billion over 30 years for the people who are moving the world. That doesn't seem good enough to me. I didn't feel it was good enough, and I wanted our voice to be heard loud and clear, that we need more and we demand better. We demand better if we are really going to rebalance the UK economy. We need investment, not cuts. First of all, one of the things that I think is really different about my manifesto and my campaign is that I'm really interested in growing our businesses first and foremost. Over the last 20 years that I've worked here, I've seen an awful lot of energy and attention in bringing inward investment into this region. And money is spent on offering sites to inward investors, giving them business rate breaks. Very, very rarely have I seen similar packages offered to our own homegrown businesses. What I want to see is that kind of energy put into growing the businesses of the future, the small micros, helping them to become small businesses. Why can't we grow the Google equivalent in electric vehicles here in the West Midlands? Why can't we grow an amazing connectivity in terms of house building, infrastructure, the smart city of the future? All of this is well within our grasp. We have the technology, we have the capability, we certainly have the young talent with a long-term plan and a vision for the future and inspiring hope in the hearts of our young people. I believe we can get there and that we have everything to play for. But we need the long-term vision. We need the long-term investment in our businesses. And we need to make sure that we have investors who understand the long-term needs and requirements of these businesses and help with the public sector pulling together with the private sector towards that vision and these goals that we can set for ourselves. Because London absolutely want accountability. They're sort of saying we want an accountable person for the West Midlands. So I think that's what London is saying, Westminster is saying. But what I would like to say to everybody out there is what we need is a strong voice, a strong unifying voice. For 20 years we've been overlooked. We haven't had our fair share. We've been governed by the main political parties during that 20 years, Labour and Conservative parties, and they haven't brought the resources into this region. So what we need is somebody who can speak up for our region, who understands our region, who understands the fact that we're a manufacturing heartland, that we have a tremendous business professional services hub, that we have an incredible creative and digital sector that is growing, and it is a real area of opportunity for us. But London need to understand that too, and we need a strong voice to champion our region and to champion the investment that we need here, and we must make sure that we're not overlooked in the future. I think I'm pretty ordinary actually, in the sense that I'm not a career politician. I have worked in local politics and I've got very close to people during that time in terms of the sorts of issues that people come to you with, that they want you to help them with. And so in that sense I believe I understand the public sector pretty well. I've worked in the private sector as a FTSE 250 company PLC director, as MD of a business, but I'm not a multi-millionaire. I've just worked in businesses helping to get things to work. And I think in that sense I'm like lots and lots of people around the West Midlands, and I've worked in all sorts of parts of the West Midlands, in Birmingham, in Coventry at Warwick University, in Leamington at Arga Rangemaster, in Telford with Arga Rangemaster. I've been around the patch sort of working in tourism, with the small B&Bs to the larger international hotel operators and the great hospitality offers, whether it's Shakespeare's Stratford or Dudley Zoo. You know, I've got to know all of these people and the issues, and I've lobbied and campaigned on behalf of them. So I think I'm really aware of what goes on in this region. I'm really aware of the issues of people out there, residents and the general population, as well as the businesses of all sizes, and I've worked with them all over that period of 20 years. Yeah, I think again, you know, this is really what I've just been talking about. You know, I think we need to represent the communities that we serve, and we need those voices to be heard. And when those voices aren't coming forward, then we need to work harder to make sure that we can hear and that they do come forward. And there's so much talent out there. It's not an issue of a lack of talent. It's somehow that the pipeline doesn't facilitate that talent to come to the fore sufficiently, in sufficient numbers. And whether we're talking about, you know, gender, ethnicity, whatever aspect of diversity we happen to be looking at. So I think we need to draw on this diversity. That's what gives richness. That's what leads to creativity. You know, that's what will challenge the prevailing thought processes and lead to disruptive change that we as a non-conformist part of the country have always been. And that's what we really need, that energy now, that mix, to drive the sort of changes that all these new technologies that are sort of at this tipping point enable us to take on at the moment. I think the housing crisis is a really serious issue. I think we need more social housing, but in order to have more social housing, we need more investment. We need to be able to draw down the investment. So there have been some issues which have sort of held back that investment from over the last 5 years or so. We need to remediate the brownfield sites. We need to grow our small and medium-sized builders again, because they've been hollowed out. We need to encourage our skills pipeline to come through, so young people to think about a career in construction and house building, so that we've got the capacity, we're building the capacity for the future. And I'd also like to say that house building for the future isn't just about bricks and mortar, it's totally integrated with the transport systems of the future, the energy storage capacity that we're going to have in the future. It's a multidisciplinary area of opportunity for this region, and one again in which we excel, have excelled and will excel into the future. But we need the vision, we need to be building the capacity for this region, skills, sites, investment, public sector investment, social housing, more social housing, and that's the path that I'm laying out in my manifesto. Well, clearly I voted to remain, and I've worked in Europe myself. My very first job actually in the Confederation of British Industry and the CBI was actually writing a report on the impact of non-tariff barriers in Europe. But I do recognise that we are where we are, and I think for me the vote to leave was really a call for reform in terms of EU governance and how the EU is run, and actually I think it was a call for reform in terms of the UK and the way we run ourselves, the fact that we have the most centralised government in Europe that has left behind too many populations, too many areas of deprivation that are the same areas of deprivation now that they were 20 years ago. And I think one of the things that has let us down is an overwhelming focus on globalization and global capital being the solution, the only solution. Instead of investing in our own homemade success, our own businesses, as we were discussing earlier, we've brought in global businesses that are a bit like a trawler, a fishing net, sweeping through our communities, taking all the money out and dumping it somewhere else globally. We've exported jobs, we've exported skills, and we've even exported pollution. We've bought cheap products, but they've cost us dear in terms of jobs and the impact on communities. And socialism equally, I feel, has taken money off everybody and redistributed it, but hasn't created the jobs in the hearts of the communities that have been devastated by the global capitalism. And I think what we need now is a form of social entrepreneurship, and it's that I'm really representing. It's building on the old liberal entrepreneurship of Joe Chamberlain and Lloyd George, and it's about us not having a form of capitalism that is a sort of sharp-elbowed, self-made complacency, but a caring, self-made place that looks after its communities, that invests in its communities from the bottom up, empowering people to be able to care for their communities and offer opportunity to the upcoming generations, whether it's sports facilities, whether it's community halls. Too many of them are being closed at the moment with the cuts, whether it's libraries, but the facilities for young people to have a wide experience as they're growing up in their communities and have the opportunity to be able to grow into people who really can make a contribution to our society and have enjoy a fulfilled career themselves. I think this is really shocking. I would adopt a zero-tolerance approach to crimes against the person, and I think really a lot of the time, though, the sort of behaviours that you're talking about aren't even crimes. They're more sort of really cultural forms of intimidation or bullying, and I think it's really by showing that this is absolutely not tolerated, by wherever possible enabling us to integrate as communities. We really need to encourage that much more in every aspect of our society, and so I think it is appalling what's happened. Well, I go back to this business of helping people to have the skills to ensure that they can change their life prospects, and really does require investing in people early on, especially if people have less opportunity early on compared to more privileged communities. So I think we spend an awful lot of money on remediation. We spend 12 billion a year on the impact of mental health. Mental health deteriorates often if people don't have a job and get isolated in their communities or come from deprived communities. So let's, instead of spending 12 billion on remediating the impact of poor mental health from all the things that might have gone wrong up to that point, let's put it right in at the beginning, early years of people's lives. Troubled families Apparently there's 50,000 troubled families across the whole of the UK. They cost 30 billion a year. Again, let's put the money in earlier. And that would be my general approach. Let's invest in people earlier on so that they can really have a fulfilled life themselves, but make a contribution to society as well. And they'll have self-respect, feel proud about themselves, and in turn look after their families instead of us spending money on remediation. I think we have to be really careful about the impacts of segregation of communities. So communities naturally sort of gather together, and then that reinforces, each community reinforces itself by doing that. But really this aspect of integration, I think this is the solution to what we're talking about. Clearly, we've got very challenging issues around the world, in order to overcome that, I think for us, I would like to see us being the most diverse and friendly community in the country, really with programs that bring our communities together, whether it's interfaith, intercultural programs that encourage us to understand and respect each other's religions, cultures, and the differences between us, and to draw on that. And as I said earlier, if we can do that and celebrate that, then I believe we can unleash a massive burst in our creativity and sort of coming together and challenging each other in a friendly, productive and constructive way. Well, I think it's appalling, the Supporting People grant going, the 10 million for people, it's most vulnerable people being affected. Tonight I'm actually spending time, I'm going up to the Haven in Wolverhampton. I'm spending time with Shelter as we look at the challenges around homelessness. I'm working around the region over the next few hours actually to look at these problems and to look at the people whose lives are impacted, the most vulnerable people in our society. I think there's some things we absolutely can do and must do, and one is we must not criminalise these people. Many of them are young people. Really, I find it quite appalling when I go to some of the colleges and I see what these young people are having to contend with. Benefits being cut, housing of the most precarious nature, and maybe being homeless in their early 20s or even younger. And have to ask ourselves, what kind of society is that? I think we have to look at the empty buildings that we have and how we can bring them into use and make them available for all the people who are vulnerable at present. We need to get our agencies working together. We mustn't criminalise people. We must do everything to support all of these people and to give them a route as well to a better future, whether it's better skills. Adult skills budget has been cut by over 50% in the last few years. The cuts are at the root of so much of this, austerity cuts. And this goes back to the 4 billion that's still to be cut in this region up to 2020. We have to stand up together and we have to say enough is enough. We need decent lives for our people here in this region and the investment in them. And this is your opportunity as a voter in the West Midlands to say enough is enough and to vote for change, to vote for reform of governance, a devolution that will help you take your future into your hands and make it for yourselves, and to vote for a better place, a self-made place that we make ourselves, and actually tackling these problems head on.